All right, let's bring you this discussion now. Afrikaner lobby groups, Afriforum and Solidarity, have accused ANC policies of fueling the deterioration of relations with the United States. Now, US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order cutting funding to South Africa over, among other things, the Expropriation Act in the country. The lobby groups have been criticizing government's BEE policies for some time, arguing that they are discriminatory. Let's unpack this with Tshediso Matona. He is the BBBEE Commissioner and he joins us via our video link. Tshediso, it's great to have you with us on the program for what is an incredibly important discussion. Where shall we begin? Is 30 years, in your opinion, enough time to undo the damage of apartheid and the decades of oppression that preceded it?
No, good afternoon, Michelle, and thank you for having me. I think you start at the correct place. What is the problem statement? Now, the BBBEE legislation's problem statement is the fact that, and nobody can dispute that, we come from 300 years of racial oppression and discrimination, starting first during colonialism and later in the latter days until 1994, apartheid. This oppression and discrimination was so total, so brutal, that it was declared a crime against humanity in terms of international law under the United Nations. Now, what did that discrimination and oppression entail? It entailed the denial of all human rights, the right to own property, the right to conduct business, the right to equality in the economic affairs. That is the sin that we should be concerned about, because 30 years, you couldn't undo the depth and the spread of that sort of history, which is still very much visible. South Africa, we're still divided. The black people live in the poorest parts of the country where there are no opportunities. That system continued after 1994. But most importantly, the Constitution recognized that we must deal with that. That is a foundational issue. It is an existential issue that we've had an unjust past, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and that must also be reflected in the economy there, to achieve an economy that also belongs to all. So that is the thing we're trying to solve here. So what is at stake with this backlash is fundamentally that. It is an attempt to overthrow the governance, democratic governance of the Republic, expounded in our Constitution as a supreme law of the country. It is an attempt to return us to white supremacy rule, where one race rules over another. So the Constitution, and I'm going to conclude on this because ultimately this is an attack on our Constitution, this is an attack on our sovereignty, about who we've chosen to be after 1994. It said that we must heal our past divisions. We must establish a society based on social justice, and that to promote this, laws and other measures to advance persons disadvantaged by unfair. And the Constitution uses the word persons disadvantaged by unfair. But we know who those are. We know who it is that was disadvantaged. So we will use laws and other measures, including preferential procurement. So if it's an internal backlash, then it has to contend with the reality that it is a denial of the very foundation of our country, of who we want to be. If it comes from outside, it is almost an attempt to recolonize us as a country, to deny that we have determined the future of our country, the principles and the values that we want our country to be governed by. We've determined it ourselves. We did it ourselves. We didn't ask anybody outside who to have a stake in that sort of issue. It is a sovereign, it's our issue. And we've adopted this constitution together, black and white, represented by our parties in parliament. So that is what is at stake, as far as I'm concerned.
So these Afrikaner lobby groups, Afriforum and Solidarity, they contend that the continuation of, they call it race-based legislation. And I'll get to the issue of that term, race-based legislation, as a way of describing BBBEE. But what these two groups contend is that it is discriminatory to a particular group in South Africa. And I just want to go back to your definition of where we've come from as a country. From apartheid to hundreds of years of our colonial past, the total denial of the humanity of a particular group of people based on the color of their skin. No right to own property, no job prospects, no ability to go where I wanted to go, no sense of equal education, a total stripping of the humanity of one particular group. So when you hear about this description, that BBBEE is a race-based policy, do you feel that in some quarters, the term equality and equity has become a violent term, a term that is seen as a threat now to another group of people?
The truth is the following, that as we speak, the ownership and control of the economy is in the hands of the few, and those few are almost entirely white. They are the insiders. They are the beneficiaries of the status quo, of an economy that is owned anything from 70 upwards, 80%, still in white hands. And the white people constituting 7% of the population, 7.2% of the population. So 98% of the population, still by and large, are spectators. We are outside. So already they have been advantaged by history. They're already inside. The white people are already inside. They live in privilege. So anybody can tell me how when you are already advantaged and you are inside, how is it that you get discriminated against? Because history has already discriminated in your favor. You are the incumbent in the system of distribution, production, and benefiting from the economy. So it is absolute nonsense. It is propaganda. It is a ruse to deceive, to obfuscate the fact that the problem that we are solving is actually to make sure that South Africa's economy, like we say in the Constitution, South Africa belongs to all of it, so must it be reflected in the economy. And we are far from achieving that. 30 years is not long enough. So the idea, for example, of a deadline to the legislation, the legislation deliberately left it open because the BEE, as a matter of fact, is voluntary. You're not compelled to do it. You're only compelled to do it if you are going to do business with the government, or you're going to do business with an enterprise that has BE credentials, and they want you to also have BE or not reduce their BE credentials. It is a very voluntary. It works with the mechanisms of the economy, and to the extent that we don't fully have control of the speed, in that sense, of transformation being attained, that it is gradual. It will be gradual. You can't put a timeline to it, because you could put a timeline 10 years and find we find that we haven't changed the status quo, but now we must give away this instrument. So it will only end when, I think, by consensus, and it will be obvious when we have reached that level of equality that renders the tool itself, in fact, redundant. But we're far from that.
Yeah.
So to use a language of race-based policy is disingenuous, when in fact, actually, what is at stake is social justice, is what the Constitution defined as social justice. That's what is at stake.
I want to get to that in just a moment. I just want to hone in on, you know, we're a big fan of statistics and what the numbers tell us, because this is a conversation that can very easily perhaps overtake us emotionally in many ways. So what did StatsSA tell us about the income and expenditure of the people who live in South Africa? This was released by Statistics South Africa on the 28th of January. And what the Statistician General said was that among all the groups of people who occupy space in our country, the white population is the one group that can afford savings. So they can afford at the end of the month to put some money away into savings. The majority of the people in South Africa, I'm reading verbatim from the Statistician General's outcomes, the majority of people in South Africa come from lower income and even lower spending. Almost half of the black-headed households are at the bottom of the spending population, while the white population group spent more sitting on the higher quintiles. The Statistician General goes on to talk about female-headed households versus male-headed households as well. So what do these numbers tell us in our economy about who is able to spend and who is able to, at the end of the month, put savings away? And this speaks to the issue of generational wealth, right, which we're trying to build up for our children.
Correct. No. So when you look at income differentials, that's another lens of the legacy of discrimination, the damage of discrimination, which has placed us, when we embarked through 1994 democracy, we were not starting at the same level. We were not starting all on one line. The white people had already centuries, decades of advantage ahead of us. And if you were to just allow the economy by itself to close that gap, it will not happen. You know, in economics, they call it trickle down. You cannot have trickle down. So this economy is notorious for its propensity to reproduce inequality. So yes, income inequality, assets, in terms of assets equality, on every dimension, you can find evidence of the fact that the legacy of discrimination is still very much with us. So we live in poor areas, in the townships and rural areas, and that's where poverty manifests. Poverty is not in white-owned areas because they are privileged. So those are the issues. Those are the issues that, you know, I think we thought when we kind of signed on to the Constitution and signed on to this future, that we're all on the same page. And for the largest part of the last 30 years, there are corporates who embrace this in good faith and have been trying to do, because they know what is at stake. They know what is the mischief that needs to be solved. So, you know, I never imagined that in this day and age there could emerge a group of interests that seek to protect the privileged of the few, and on the basis of race. So, in fact, this idea that is race-based, even this sort of the motive of this sort of attack are very racist based. It's an attempt to preserve white supremacy, to deny equity, to deny the rule by equity, where we all are benefiting to the level of our contribution, the level of our ability, in a free market. Absolutely.
The ability to start off on an equal footing. Such simple words, but apparently such a difficult idea. Let me thank you for your time this afternoon.